Um, Coming up, we're going to talk about money, athletes, and bankruptcy with our special guest Injil Muhammad. Keep it here, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Keeping Score on WBAI 99.5 FM, streaming live on WBAI.org. Today, we're excited to have Injil Muhammad, CPA and the CEO and founder of Madison Ave Advisors, headquartered on Madison Avenue in New York City. His firm specializes in tax strategy and IRS problem solutions. And Jill, thanks for joining us on Keeping Score. Tell the listeners about yourself and what you're here to talk about.
Yes, sir. First, thank you for having me on Keeping Score. I love that. I love that name.
Thank you.
I love that. Yes, sir. So, again, I'm happy to be here. A little about my background. When I was a student many, many years ago, walking on the campus of Syracuse University, always heard stories about how wealthy people paid very little in income taxes. So I was always attracted to the tax planning space. And upon graduation in 1986, I worked with one of the largest accounting firms in the world at that time called Arthur Anderson in their tax department, right here in New York City, as a matter of fact. And before starting my own practice, I worked with Ernst & Young, again, in their tax practice. So I started my own practice at the age of 26, many, many years ago. As a matter of fact, God willing, next year in 2020 would mark 30 years since we've been in business. And what we pride ourselves on is helping our clients keep more of what they make. Simply put, our goal is to make sure we maximize our clients' after-tax wealth. And the way we accomplish that is by understanding each client's unique situation and employing proper tax investment strategies to complement their goals.
Right. In the past couple shows, or a few shows ago, we talked about athletes and hiring agents and some of the problems that go along with that, and also financially, where athletes get caught up a lot. We in our opening to the show, we actually talked about some ex-athletes that had problems. We always hear stories of athletes who can't manage their money. There was a CNBC report in 2018 that reported 60% of NBA players go broke within 5 years of departing the league. 78% of former NFL players experience financial distress 2 years after retirement, and a large percentage of Major League Baseball players file for bankruptcy within 5 years of retirement. What are your thoughts on that, and what are the reasons for that?
Well, first of all, those are ugly numbers. Those are extremely ugly numbers. But honestly, I think the underlying reason for the fact that athletes have so many financial problems is that there's a lack of understanding of the purpose of money. Most of us, and again, that it's not just with athletes; it's with the general population.
Right.
Most of us believe that money is actually to be spent. The purpose of money is really to make more money. Now, obviously, you can't take every dollar and invest it, but if you have a dollar and you spend a dollar, you're eventually going to wind up in bankruptcy. So the reality is that athletes and all of us need to take a percentage of what we earn and invest that money so that when we're no longer working or no longer on the field or no longer on the court, those investments will give us a return so we can live out of. And here's the thing about the tax law. When you're working as a W-2 person or earner or in your business, the highest tax rate is 37%. Okay, so when you work for money, you pay the highest rate, which is 37%. When your money works for you, the highest rate is 20%. And we're talking about capital gains and dividends. So the tax code is telling us where you should position yourself from a wealth standpoint. So when a young athlete signs a large contract, they have a certain window of opportunity to earn most of their money. Most of us, we make money over our working lives, 30 years or so.
Right.
These guys are making money, if they're lucky, 2 decades. I mean, you have to be one of the great ones to stay around for 2 decades.
Right.
So that money needs to stretch. So it's very important that they understand the tax implication of what they're doing, because one of the other reasons is that they're not aware of the tax liabilities associated with the money they make. So, for example, if someone signs a large contract, they start living out of that contract. And not only do they start living out that contract, people around them have heard about how much money they've made, and they believe that that's the gross number that they're working with. So the point is, when you talk about taxes and agent fees, a good portion of your money is already spent. In addition to that, risky investments are a problem. A lot of times, the athletes try to keep up with one another. And someone may approach them and say, I have this great investment. It's a 300% return. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So from my perspective, as an athlete is already in a risky business in that they have a short time frame to earn money. Injuries come up, as you mentioned earlier with Mr. Luck. Injuries happen. So you need to be more conservative with your outside investments since you're already in an industry that's already risky to begin with. So those are some of the reasons that, family, friends, choice of who you hang out with, going through divorce, children out of wedlock. These are things that would happen. It's not unique to athletes. We want to beat up on them.
Right.
But the point is that you have to be organized. Because here's the thing with money. Money leaves people who make bad decisions. It's attracted to order. It's attracted to structure. It's attracted to great ideas. So if you're spending and spending and spending, your money's actually being attracted to someone who's not so much set a trap for you, but have set up a business structure to attract your money. So again, we want to get to the point where we're living, our assets are working for us as opposed to us earning income, like I mentioned, that's 37% versus 20%. So those are some of the reasons I believe that athletes are, run into trouble financially.
Yeah, I mean, listening to you break that down, it obviously makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like something that agents or advisors should be telling all athletes. I mean, is that something you think happens, or is it are they getting bad advice? Are they not listening to the good advice they get? What do you think the issues are?
I think it's probably all of the above. But the first thing is this: the athlete themselves have to be responsible for where they are and where they're going to be in the future, and when you meet an advisor, a lawyer, accountant, whoever the case may be, the more knowledge you bring to the table, the more that person is going to respect you. That's just human nature. Now, we don't expect athletes or anyone else to be well-versed in all the tax laws and financial instruments, but keep it simple. Make sure you understand the basics. So, for example, make sure you have a strong budget, a monthly budget, so you understand what comes in and what goes out, and where does it go? Because maybe those flowers that cost you $5,000, you didn't even know about. So you have to make sure that you keep your eye on your money. Don't go to sleep at the wheel. A lot of times, I remember Biggie had a comment long ago with one of his songs. Don't worry about that. My accountant handles that. in terms of paying the bills. You want to make sure, as an athlete, whoever you keep your checkbook. You make sure you understand what goes out, where it's going, and that it's accounted for. So budgeting is important because when you budget, you have to have an understanding of where's the money going to come from so you can invest. Because investing is the key. Because working for 15 years in the league, whatever you may be, this case may be, these guys have to plan for 40 years or more after they retire. So even if you are extremely intelligent, if your money is lumpy in that it doesn't come consistently, you can run into trouble. Even people win the lottery. I understand that 70% of people win the lottery are broke after 5 years.
Right.
Because you're getting a lump sum piece of money and you're not familiar with the purpose of what money is.
Right. Which shows you it's not really an athlete thing. It's someone coming into money when they're not used to having money thing.
Exactly. And you get excited because when you get a lot of money, the first thing you're going to get excited. And you begin to operate from emotion. So the key is to step back, think about what you're doing, help people around you because, again, a lot of athletes have a lot of people pulling at them who've helped them achieve their goals. So, of course, they want to give back, and they should. But you have to do it in a reasonable way so that you don't hurt yourself and also hurt the person that you're funding. Because believe me, it doesn't matter how much money you make. If you spend more than you make, you're going to be broke. It's just math.
Right. What about in terms of athletes choosing the right advisors and agents? What's your advice? What kind of questions should they ask? What should they look for?
Well, it's difficult to just know how to trust someone because this is a relationship that has to develop. But what I would study is what has this person that I'm entrusting, have they been doing in the last 10, 15, 30 years? What's their family life structure? Are they trustworthy? You also want to make sure that you're not being overcharged in terms of fees. You want to ask those kind of questions. How's the fee structure? typically when you work with an advisor, you want an advisor that has what is called a fiduciary responsibility, in that they are responsible from a fiduciary standpoint as to what they're recommending to you, and they're not making high commission on recommending that you get into certain investments. So you want someone who's in it with you, who has a character. But again, that's something that you have to have the wisdom, and you have to be blessed, and find people as such. And then what you also want to do is learn as much as you can. Interview financial advisors. Go meet with them. Go meet with different advisors. Talk to them about different scenarios. Usually you can get a feeling for what a person brings to the table. Of course, they have to be knowledgeable, but it's hard to say you can trust this guy, you can trust this gal. That's something that that's on a personal level that you have to develop. But just make sure that they're not in the newspaper for stealing money.
That's important.
That's critically important.
What about family members? I mean, you talk about trust. I mean, most people, the people they trust most are family members. But sometimes family members can get you in trouble financially. What's your advice as far as that goes?
I mean, usually with the family, those are people you trust. But again, they've helped you, or they didn't, and they're looking for you to take care of them in certain circumstances. And it's more like a guilt trip. So you have to be careful with family, because you may run into a scenario where you're giving someone money and they're not producing, and they're expecting. I think I read a story about an actress. I think Monique was talking about something about Hollywood, in terms of she was gaining a lot of weight, and no one was telling her about this, but I think her future husband, but her husband.
Right.
So she was saying that the family persons were just saying, "Listen, just make sure that check is there. We don't care. Right. We don't care how big you get.
Right.
Just make sure that the check is there." So again, that's an extreme scenario. I mean, you have to again have relationships with people, and hopefully they value you for who you are, and not the dollar that you bring into their lives. But you grow as a team. LeBron is a great example. He helped a lot of his guys that he hung out with. They're all in business,
right?
And they bring something to the table as opposed to a handout. So and you grow together. But you have to watch out for family. You have to watch out for people who don't have what you have. But again, the responsibility is on the players,
right,
to make better decisions and to be firm. And if you need to have an intermediary to speak with your family regarding finance, have that person explain, we can't do this because we have to pay the IRS. We have to pay all these state agencies. Like, for example, athletes, they play in different parts of the country, all over the country. They have to file state tax returns in all parts of the country. A lot of people don't have to do that. Okay, so it's important that they understand the complete obligation. And maybe you need to explain that to family persons and let them know, listen, this is why we can't do this, because these obligations that I have. But you want to keep those relationships, because no one wants to live on an island by themselves.
Right.
Because they didn't get there by themselves. So you don't want to get to the point where you're cold and you're not, giving assistance to people who you love.
Right. Sounds like a fine line.
It is.